Hey, this is Amir. We're going to do number 7. Unlike the last two videos, 7 is not a two-part question, but it is an inference question. So we can't treat this like a simple, basic reading question because with inference questions, we have to use the if-then strategy. Basically, if something is true, then something else has to be true. We're not going to be able to find it like exactly word for word from the passage. So let's read the question. Which of the following can be inferred from the 6th paragraph, lines 51 through 63? So we'll read this first. Most of Mrs. Vardaman's boarders were away during the day, being nearly all department clerks and businessmen. But there was one of them who was about the house a great deal from morning to night. This was a young man named Henry Hopkins Hargraves. Everyone in the house addressed him by his full name, who was engaged at one of the popular vaudeville theaters. Vaudeville has risen to such a respectable plane in the last few years, and Mr. Hargraves was such a modest and well-mannered person, that Mrs. Vardaman could find no objection to enrolling him upon her list of boarders. Okay, so it's kind of tough to, answer this in our own words because there's a lot of things that's being said about Mr. Henry Hopkins Hargraves. So basically, one of them he was about the house during the day. He was engaged in the theater, and he was a modest, well-mannered person. So we basically have to go to the answer choices and eliminate what can't be inferred. So it says Henry Hopkins Hargraves is one of the most popular vaudeville actors in the area. It does not say that, and we cannot infer that. So basically it says he was engaged at one of the popular vaudeville theaters, and vaudeville has risen to such a respectable plane in the last few years. So if that's true, does that necessarily mean Henry Hopkins Hargraves is one of the most popular vaudeville actors in the area? That's not true. It doesn't say that, and we can't infer that from what's here. So A is gone. Henry Hopkins demands that acquaintances refer him by his full name. It says here, everyone in the house addressed him by his full name. But we can't infer that Henry Hopkins Hargraves demands that everyone address him by his full name. It's just everyone did. There's nothing that we can infer that he demanded, like, hey, everybody refer to me by my first name. So B's gone. Mrs. Vardaman enthusiastically embraces the prospect of Hargraves as a tenant. So we got to be careful with this one. It says Mrs. Vardaman could not find no objection to enrolling him upon her list of boarders. So that's different than saying this. Mrs. Vardaman being like, well, okay, I can't really find an objection. He's a well-mannered person. I can't really find anything, no objection to enrolling him. That's very different from saying that Mrs. Vardaman enthusiastically embraces the prospect. So saying, oh, I find no objection, is very different from saying Mrs. Vardaman enthusiastically embraces the prospect of Hargraves as a tenant. So that's wrong. So that leaves us with D. Vaudeville was not always regarded as a very respectable profession. See, that's where the case where inferred comes. It doesn't say this here, but right here it says vaudeville has risen to such a respectable plane in the last few years. This is 58 and 59. So vaudeville has risen to such a respectable plane. So let's say this is the level of respect right here. at one point, it was somewhere down here where it was not respected. So vaudeville was not always regarded as a very respectable profession, because if you rise to a respectable plane, that means at one point you weren't as a respectable profession. So again, that's why I say like that with inferred questions, when we have this word, this is what you got to do. Basically, if vaudeville has risen to such a respectable plane in the last few years, that means that vaudeville wasn't always regarded as a very respectable profession. So that has everything to do with inference. And so that's why the answer is D.